SOBRsafe has a touch-based, IoT-enabled alcohol detection platform called SOBRsafe. It features real-time remote reporting, also data analytics. And with me is the chairman and CEO, Dave Gandini, to talk about the company and about you. Let's just start with you. Give me your background and then what brought you to be leading this company.
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having us. We greatly appreciate it. So my background, I started in the startup space when I was 25, 26 years old. And I'm kind of motivated by prospect and potential. And when I see things that have potential, I have the ability to bring some capital around those ideas, bring in the right people, and kind of build the business. So this is my sixth kind of startup. And what I really want to do in this particular startup is make a difference socially. And with this technology, we're the first to really talk about preventative rather than after the fact. So I was really inspired out of all the companies I was with, most inspired now, probably because of my maturity now, my age, and the things that I've seen and done. I really think we can make a difference in society, so I'm super excited about it. But basically, startup guy pretty much my whole life in business, and really enjoy it. Really enjoy building teams and raising capital.
Now, when you say preventative, prevent drunk driving, for example, which is still a problem in society, those are the kind of things you're trying to prevent?
Well, keep organizations, roadways, and companies safe by preventing up front when employees enter or drivers enter to get their keys or go to work, instead of after the fact, which this is all we do in this country today. When issues occur, we check for alcohol or drugs after the fact.
That's right.
Doesn't seem to make sense.
So big companies with a lot of drivers, they have fleets of vehicles, delivery companies, things like those would be your main customers.
243,000 fleet companies in the U.S. So we have some market potential for sure.
Now, have you raised capital to expand?
Yes. So the business has been in motion for about 3 years, and I've raised just over the last year about $25 million. Combining a couple of different offerings plus what we've done. So yes, we've raised capital in very tough market conditions, as you've got background, and we talked about that earlier. Very tough market conditions. We've raised a good chunk of money at very fair terms.
And you're traded here at the NASDAQ. Excuse me.
SOBR.
So you're traded here. So that was also part of your capital raise as well.
Yes.
In the public market.
We uplisted on May 20th of 2022.
Okay. So how does the technology work?
The technology is pretty straightforward. So simply, when an employee enters, they put their hand on our device. This is a biometric identifier, and this is our reservoir where we determine whether or not there was alcohol in their system from the vapor coming out of their skin. So this is roughly about 10 seconds. If you're thinking in terms of timing, a breathalyzer is anywhere between 30 and maybe a minute and a half, so less than 10 seconds. So that's how this works. Then the data is transferred to the portal, where the customer has access to it, take whatever action they need to take after they have this information.
I've never heard of alcohol detection through a finger.
Yes.
So that's amazing. What is the revenue model for the company?
Well, the revenue model is equipment, hardware, and software. So with the particular, we'll talk a little bit about the band in a minute, I think, but with the SOBRcheck device, the customer pays for the device or devices fitted by the number of employees they have, a number of entrance and egress in their facility. And there's a SaaS model from there where they pay X amount of dollars per user per month over a long-term contract.
What are some use cases? Like, explain how a company would use it.
Let's talk about, we did a release a couple weeks back about a big oil and gas company that we work with. So they have 19 locations. In each one of their locations, there's an entry point. And what happens is we'll locate our equipment at the entry point. And as the employees come in, they'll test, and as long as they're good, keep in mind that every company has a zero tolerance policy for the most part, so all we're doing is helping them support that. So they'll come in and they'll test. As long as they test negative, they'll go to work and do their thing. If there's a positive test, then they'd go visit occupational safety or the HR person to have an additional test to see if in fact there's an issue. And then that particular situation, every time they leave the facility for lunch, they got to check out. They come back, they have to check in, and at the end of the day, they check out. So there's four or five times a day that they use the device to make sure they're completely safe and alcohol-free.
Well, I would think that companies would like this. This would absolve them of litigation if there's an accident or something? I mean, this could...
Statistically, I mean, we'll talk about statistics, but if you take abroad across all the markets that we're in right now, about almost 50% of all accidents in corporate America involve alcohol. 50%. About 13 to 15% of all drivers say that they consume alcohol as they're driving vehicles. And then in the oil and gas space, I think it's over 30% issue with binge drinking. So what that means is it's not about identifying the individuals that are drinking. It's about creating a safer environment. It's about creating a safer culture. And at the end, the insurance companies tie into all this because if you can validate through our data that you have a safe environment, you're going to get a discount of some kind.
So what's the go-to-market strategy then?
Well, the go-to-market strategy, we have a sales force, right? And we've been in the market since June or July of last year. So we're selling to 3 segments of the market. Fleet and facility, first. The second is rehabilitation. We'll talk about that with the band. And then the third part space is justice, where if you're on probation, you have to check in and you use a breathalyzer. You say it takes a minute, minute and a half, and somebody types your name in. We are now in revenue with companies that are managing probation for states, and you check in putting your fingers on the device. Okay. So those 3 facilities. I think if you look at our press releases, we've signed 10 distributors, which is another part of the strategy. Distributors have our product. They own customers. I think right now with the distributors we have, they own 500 potential customers. So they're out selling our product. We've got 4 sales individuals now. We're out directly selling the product. And I want to say we've signed almost maybe 10 accounts over the last 6 or 8 months. So we're in that early stage, the innovator stage, and we're starting to bring on business. The most notable was the oil company and gas company TerraTech, which we have 19 locations. So it's our first big nationwide install. Okay.
And then I mentioned that you collect data. So what is done with that data? Does that help with insurance companies and trying to, I don't know, put some kind of analytics together?
Yeah. So the data that we collect and the fingerprint that we store is biometric. It's not a human, it's not a fingerprint, so we don't have issues with HIPAA, for instance. Right. They are data points, that's the first thing. So our data is secure. We don't identify anything that we store by the user, it's just a number. So that's part 1. Part 2 is we collect data from any and every time you enter or exit a facility as an employee, but what that data is used for, not to track or target that employee. It's so at the end of the month, I can provide a document to my insurance company that says, I've had alcohol-free month. I had an individual that had a problem. We removed him or her from the workplace. They didn't drive a vehicle that day. We sent them home. They're under some type of program. But it validates that 100% of your workforce is alcohol-free. And again, the insurance companies will respond to that.
Yeah, and I assume it would show you some trends too, that you could also use that information to prevent things.
Yeah, a simple trend, right, would be if you're in a manufacturing facility, if you have less employees, you're gonna have less output. If you change that culture and individuals aren't drinking at lunch because they know there's a device, maybe it improves and of course, sick days as well, right? There's a number of things around that.
So you mentioned the wearable band. So talk about what that is. What is the application?
Yeah, so Wearable Band is basically taking the same technology that we have, miniaturizing it and putting it in the band form. So it's a smaller version of the SOBR check, which we'll talk about later. What'll happen is, and how it's being used, and we'll talk again, let's talk a few statistics. 70% of all individuals that go into rehab go back into rehab in the first year. I mean, think about that. And the dollars are being spent in the U.S., I think $249 billion a year around the alcohol problem. $249 billion, I mean, it's significant. So what we have tested and worked with a couple of rehab providers. So here's how this is gonna work. You wanna quit drinking, you've had problems. You come out of rehab, you put the band on. What the band does is that if you engage in drinking, it'll send a signal to a telehealth professional. They'll get on the phone with you or attempt to get on the phone with you and say, Dave, what's going on? How can we help you? So we hope if we can educate and can stay in contact with these individuals, then we'll reduce that recidivism. But again, it ties into costs, ties into insurance companies. And we'll be launching that here in the next 30 days or so, somewhere in mid-May. But we already have customers and they're interested in launching the device. So stay tuned for that. Also, we're going to launch the device from a consumer perspective. So if you're a parent, you have a 17-year-old child, they want to take the family car out on a Friday or Saturday night, They put the band on, you can track location of where that child is. And if they have alcohol, you can get on the phone and say, listen, please don't drive the car. We'll come and pick you up. So we'll launch in that space too and see where we go.
As a parent of a 15-year-old, I can see how that would be appealing. So.
Yeah, my brothers would have never been able to drive family cars in their days.
So any other developments, or what are kind of your goals here?
Well, I mean, the biggest, penetrate. So first of all, we're going from the innovator to early adopter phase in the market. So we've been selling now actively selling for about 9 months. So obviously we want to gain penetration. Just a few things that we've done. First, we've been to a dozen trade shows in the last maybe 11 months. 10,000 companies or alcohol test groups have seen our device. 2,500 have touched our device. So we've got a significant funnel there. So we've got a direct sales ramp. We've got 10 distributors. We'll probably add another 5 to 7 by mid-year, and they're approaching their 500 customers for alcohol testing. So we've got direct sales, distribution, and we're talking to several companies about licensing right now. That's where we really want to move the business forward, and we have some modified technology that we'll discuss probably in the next month that could walk us into the telematics space. And I think there's somewhere in the vicinity of 17 million telematics devices right now in use. So growth through licensing, is our big key down the road. But right now we've got to gain penetration in the markets that we're in.
Well, thank you so much. Very interesting to hear about the company, Dave. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us. We appreciate it. Thanks.